Hello and welcome to Learner's Permit. I'm Ryan Hamilton, and I've got Peter Lonnquist on with me today. In this episode of Learner's Permit, Peter and I talk music composition and the process of making art in general. Our discussion includes the role of music and sound in cinema, approaches to music composition, and creative drive. It was great having Peter on to talk, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. Okay, Peter Lonnquist. Thank you for joining me today. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So Peter and I both went to Minnesota State University Moorhead together. We graduated the same year. In fact, we were co-RAs, and we were probably, I don't necessarily know if we fit the mold for what the average RA was, but it was a good experience.
We fit the mold for applying.
Yeah. That's right. So Peter, you graduated with a couple of music degrees. What did you graduate with?
I have a major in music composition and then a minor in music business and music finance.
Okay.
Music business and music industry.
Music industry. What were your studies like? I guess in general, what did you learn about music from your studies? And what did you learn about yourself as a composer or a consumer even?
In general, I guess the four main things were music theory, and then performance, and the composition classes directly, and then classes that were more to do with mixing and microphones and all that kind of things. And then the second part of it was what exactly again? What did I learn?
What did you learn about yourself as a composer? Because would you consider yourself a composer?
I would consider myself a composer. I'd like to put more time into it to completely be comfortable saying that, but yeah, I'd still consider myself a composer. And what did I learn about myself as a composer? I guess that composing, I learned about it as like a very personal thing, and as I guess I discovered I'm a lot more of an artsy person than I had originally thought I was. I was going in thinking I was going to do like guitar and piano and all the typical stuff, and ended up completely somewhere else. So I guess that's what I learned about myself generally.
Okay, yeah, because I've listened to several of your songs now. I remember you showing me a couple of them when we were studying together, and then in preparation for this episode, I listened to the little library that you gave me, and it definitely seems, it definitely different than the majority of music that I've heard in my life. It really kind of reminds me of, like, one of your songs really kind of strikes me as like a soundscape more than a song, I guess. Like it seems to really, it's a little more immersive in the way that it doesn't necessarily always have like a clearly defined like rhythm or beat to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, I think there's still structure to it and everything in like a musical way, but yeah, there isn't like a definite melody you're following. I try and have some sort of elements of like pitch and rhythm tying everything together throughout the piece. But yeah, there's usually not strong, beats or anything like that. Even in the newer pieces and stuff like that, I'd make whole scaffolding of beats throughout the whole piece, and then at the end I'd go and like tear it all down and just have the more ambient types of sounds, I guess you could call, that aren't as rhythmic driven. So yeah.
Where do your songs come from? Because I've been listening to a couple of the songs, and like clearly it's some mashups of like well-known songs, but other times it seems like it's just grabbed from like a sound library somewhere.
Yeah, all over the place. The BBC sound effects library is a big one, and then just free libraries online. And then I did record some things a little bit by myself. I didn't really get that into it because it took time away from composing to be doing that myself. And then, like different classical pieces from animes that I'd watched as a kid. Yeah, just anywhere, whatever was kind of coming into my mind as fitting. I'd try it out, and then I'd edit it in different ways to bring out the elements of those pieces that fit in with what I was working on.
All right. So, do you think do you get more pleasure or maybe more like satisfaction from working on a working on composing a piece or like a series of pieces than you would really trying to like perform some sound or some song like as well as you could, and kind of like a typical like a performer? Like would you do you prefer being a composer more than you do a performer?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I like composing way better. I like being able to go and lock myself away and not have anyone hear what I'm doing until I want them to hear it or have some kind of finished version or something like that. And that was one of the things that has always bothered me with performance is that even when you're in a practice room or something like that, just the idea of someone hearing me practice just like drives me crazy. I can't stand it. So yeah, composing works a lot better for me that I can uh, edit all these little details down to just the way I want it and have it the same each time I go back to hit play.
Okay. Okay, so you really feel like you don't want anyone to hear your music unless you like explicitly give them permission to. Like you don't want anyone to hear um like progress that you make on a song. You want it to be like binary, like all or nothing.
For the most part, I mean, I'll share things with people as I'm working on them because sometimes you don't always know when you're done with a piece either. So sometimes you'll be like, oh, I'm just about done with this, like check it out, and then it'll be like another 2 months of you working on it. It'll be something different in the end. So uh, for the most part, yeah, I try and have it mostly complete, I guess, or at least like sections that are complete. It doesn't have to be a whole piece, I guess, necessarily, but at least yeah, sections and things like that.
Yeah. Okay. Because you also play a couple of instruments, right? Does that
Mhm.
ever like influence the way that you compose the song?
Yeah, do you want me to give a summary of my instruments too that I play?
Please.
Okay, so yeah, I've played violin since third grade, and then I've played guitar since high school, and I did piano in college, and I sang in high school a bit too, in like musicals and things like that. And both my parents are musical, so I've had stuff always around me, even since I was a kid, and I do like four part singing in church and all that kind of stuff with my siblings and everything. And I haven't used it too much in my composing, but it does influence it in uh, I guess in phrasing and how I think of ideas and string them together. It's the same as if I was sitting at a piano and plunking things out and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And I don't know, I guess, yeah, maybe some of uh, the way that I go through composing is the same as when I was younger and just trying to make things up on guitar and string them together. So there's definitely larger ideas of like structure and things like that I have now, but just the general creativity comes from yeah probably performing on instruments and messing around with them in my room as a kid.
Yeah. Sure. I'm sure it gives you a little bit of like confidence too. Like I've made sounds before that people like. Maybe I can do it again
Yeah,
this time.
well, there's definitely that too that I don't feel like I have to prove myself as much as a musician as if I was only doing the really abstract stuff because I still have to deal with that somewhat that like oh you're not like a really real music person and you're like well I've played instruments and you're like oh I guess you are okay. So I mean like it's helped in that way and I still would like to add instruments back in a little bit more. I've been working on guitar and singing more lately, and I do want to show a little bit more of that credibility and like some of the music I'm going to be working on soon here, and then I'll probably go more abstract again. But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a thing you have to deal with when you make abstract music, like trying to prove yourself to the like traditional viewpoint.
Sure. Is there like a hierarchy in the musical world? Is it like opera singers are on top and then like DJs are on bottom, or?
It depends on who you're asking and depends on the time period, I guess. Right now, it seems like DJs are on top, and maybe in the 1400s, opera singers were on top. So I guess it kind of depends. Yeah, it really depends on who you're talking to. But from an academic viewpoint, I think, yeah, like definitely Mozart and things like that are on top. And like the first violin players for them, or yeah, some of the singers and things. And then this type of more abstract music is maybe like a little bit above like rock music and things like that, but yeah, still seen as second tier or something at least.
Okay. Well, that just got me thinking about I guess modern composers. I only know of a couple off the top of my head, and it kind of strikes me as wild that so many of like the most renowned classical composers, like the Mozarts and the Beethovens and the Bachs, still have like so much longevity. It's really surprising to me that like specifically in composition you have these like figures that it seems that we haven't outgrown. Does that almost feel stifling for you as a composer to know that there are like only a handful of composers that people know about? Do you almost feel like you're in the shadow of some of those well-known composers?
Yeah, it definitely is stifling, like especially some of the only careers you can get as a composer for like music or video games, and both of those are still pretty influenced by yeah, the classical greats and things like that. I mean, obviously you don't hear stuff that sounds like exactly like Mozart, but just like classical type music derived from that in general. And I'm kind of surprised. I'm not surprised by the longevity. Like they're really good, and I'm glad that people have continued to hand them down. But I'm surprised by yeah, they're uh, still being held in very high regard. I don't think that's necessarily necessary. I don't know. Yeah, they are very good, but they're not untouchable, I would say.
Sure. And it kind of reminds me of I went to Barcelona like 3 years ago, and they're still trying to construct that giant church that Gaudi started, the
Hmm.
Sagrada La Familia or something like that, and like it's still under construction, and there's still a huge debate on what they can and cannot build in it, and like how far they can deviate from this architect's original plan, and it just like it must be so hard for Spanish architects to try to get well known because like Gaudi is still dominating the landscape a couple hundred years after he's died. It just it seems wild, and it kind of can kind of draw a parallel to
That's
some of the
true.
composers.
That's really good comparison. But I think with um, Gaudi's work, the difference would be that it's still a work that's being made and still something that wouldn't be financially like possible for most architects to achieve, to have like every single window custom and every single door custom and all that kind of stuff. So in that way, it's different, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where I was going with that, but yeah, that's part of it.
No, I'm sure that's true. I'm sure that's true. It just seems like it can almost stifle like growth, like in the way that you said that some of those composers aren't untouchable. It seems like a vision that a architect had, and I said a couple hundred years ago, but it looks like he died in 1925. It seemed like a someone who has been gone for so long. Like I almost wonder if he should even get a say in what the city is gonna do from here on out. But I guess that's neither here nor there. Um, you when we were talking and kind of brainstorming some ideas for this episode, you said that you spend plenty of time listening and thinking about music and the reasons for and against spending time composing. Um, why would you spend time not composing, or why wouldn't you compose if you had the opportunity to?
I'm still someone who I don't know. I think that art is important and a good thing, but I'm not someone who's so into it that I want to sacrifice like every single thing for it. So like especially being just getting married in this last year, like I wanted to spend a lot more time with Becky and develop that and make sure that we had a good start to our marriage and everything. I thought that you know important things like that in your life still need time for developing more than art or music sometimes, at least to me. And then plus two, when I messaged you that was around the time that Chester Bennington killed himself. And
Hmm.
he was a huge childhood influence for me, like probably the first person who for some reason made me think that I could make music more and stuff like that. And so for like him, a lot of his music was trying to express, like how he's feeling and things like that. And that's a very common reason for like people saying to make art and things like that, is to express how you're feeling. But then for him, you saw how it can kind of trap you into being obsessed with that original negative thing, even if positive things are coming out of it. And so uh,
Sure. Yeah.
it's, yeah, you
It
have
could
to
become
be
so
careful.
self-reinforcing. Like
Yeah.
if you have the persona of someone who is, um, like troubled. If that's your identity and that's literally how you made like millions of dollars and how you became famous, yeah, like where do you go from there if you're afraid that you know people will stop listening to your music? It seems like you'd almost have to keep returning to that and like digging around in old
Hmm.
wounds and finding new ways to hurt from it.
And that's part of why I like making this abstract stuff and kind of art for art's sake too, is that there's just uh, kind of nothingness, kind of goodness, like pureness about its like seed, its origin, versus like something like that. Or yeah, I don't know. It's just more of genuine competition over music, like basic elements of that, and not really anything necessarily else all the time. And I don't know. I think that's better. Like if like how the Russians wanted to have more of like a friendly, competitive uh, workforce battle between the U.S. and Russia, and the U.S. just kept wanting to push like the nuclear thing instead. And those seeds just keep leading to like where we are today with North Korea and everything.
Hmm.
So yeah, the origin of something kind of dictates a lot of the rest of it, which is kind of ties back in with what you were saying with Mozart and things like that too.
Sure, that we kind of just have we have the blueprint for something that's created, and you can just kind of like it has its own momentum, right? Once you've
Hmm.
began it, and it's so much easier to continue with that momentum than it is to change course.
Hmm. So I've done a lot of that since college and everything too. Yeah, rethinking where I want to come from with music and things like that too, because it's a very important question, and a lot of people don't think that philosophically about music because they don't think of it as that big of a thing. It's a lot of people. It's just kind of an emotional thing, and that's it. So. Mhm.
Do you see composing music as kind of like a selfish act?
Um. Uh. That's that's such a tricky question. Uh. I think I think like if I have to go with just like my gut reaction, I kind of feel yes that it is a selfish thing, kind of, but it can obviously lead to much more. And you can, and as we were talking about the seed, like you can start with your origin of having it be for other people and things like that. But for me, I always feel like yeah, it is a little bit of a selfish thing because it's yeah coming from this art direction rather than like I grew up with a very religious family, and so I always feel like for it to be worthwhile, it should have something to do with God in every single thing from the origin, or else it's yeah selfish or something like that. So it might just be kind of upbringing to you that gives me that negative feeling towards it a little bit too. I don't know.
Sure. And I mean, like going back to what you said about like whether or not you were spending time, with your new wife. And congratulations, by the way. That's
Thank
great.
you.
um, yeah, I mean, like if it's a decision between, like having like a nice dinner or, you know, sitting together and talking or going on a walk or something or, kind of being alone and trying to compose something for yourself, I can understand why it would seem like a difficult choice, right? It's
Hmm.
I guess everything's a balance. Like if you want to create any sort of good that people can consume that will like benefit them more than just like in that moment, or it can benefit them over and over like a song can. Um, it's hard to balance like how much time and effort you need to put into that in order for it to be worth it, and how much of it is like almost like wasted time, or like time that you could spend with people who are important to you, or with some sort of idea which is important to you.
Hmm.
That's tricky.
Definitely.
So I just saw Dunkirk a couple weeks ago. Have you seen Dunkirk?
Yep.
Um, I was really struck by the score in Dunkirk, because it really seemed more like it was just like a soundscape more than it was like a film score that really tried to, like, I mean, like a lot of film scores will have like, like cellos or violins when
Mhm.
things are like really intense to like ratchet up the intensity even more. But Dunkirk used a lot of interesting sound effects from the scene as a kind of um, like a transition between different characters. Like for instance, when the pilot was running out of fuel, um, he looked at his watch, which had a ticking sound, and then that ticking
Mhm.
sound became like part of the overture that was playing, that like other sounds layered onto, and it created this sense of urgency because you hear the ticking of a watch. I was wondering if you paid a lot of attention to the soundscape that was crafted for Dunkirk, and if in general, like, you really listen to scores in films.
Yeah, I might get sidetracked here, so you might have to remind me of the question.
It's
But
okay.
I guess that's what I was going to mention earlier too. But yeah, with a soundscape, I guess I would consider this music more than a soundscape because it's directing of energy much more. Whereas a soundscape, I feel, is more of something that, like you said, is more like immersive, puts you in something that makes you think you're in nature, but doesn't really care about the directing of energy. Like something where you're just listening to sounds of rain or sounds of this or that. There's lots of random sounds, which makes it more of noise and kills like a steady flow of energy. Whereas that, it's like this constant flow of energy. And even how you're talking about the clicking of the guy's clock then translating into music, that's kind of like, yeah, this continuous flow of energy too. And so to me, that makes it more of, I'd call that music more than a soundscape. And I guess that's kind of why I consider my stuff more music than soundscape a lot of times too, even though it's very similar. That's more of like the dividing idea behind it for me. And so yeah, I definitely paid attention to the music in there. And I yeah, it's, you can definitely feel it. It's very heavy. He controls the energy levels very, very well, and is able to um, masterfully keep them building. Yeah, I guess I haven't gone back and listened to it again since the first time I've seen it, so I can't really speak on like specifics to how he does it as much as I'm just remembering the feeling of it.
Mm.
And uh, yeah, he's definitely controlling the energy very well. And I guess the reason why it's harder for people to think of it as music as much, I guess, is because the energy is so like slowed down to this like extremely slow pace over, minutes and minutes and minutes. Like maybe there's like 10-minute sections of like practically just like one chord developing and things like that. But it is still some kind of musical chord developing. It's just at such a ridiculous rate that, yeah, most people kind of lose track of it as being like a musical piece, I guess. I was
Yeah.
listening to some stuff earlier, like Luis Andreessen, his piece De Stat or something like that. It's a DE space STAAT, I believe. And that too, it has all these longer sections of this energy being drawn out and drawn out and drawn out, versus like Mozart, how it's all these like little phrases and you can hear it rather quickly, and it's much more understandable and precise and everything like that. And then, do I listen to music in general for movies? Uh,
Or like, do you find yourself almost like critiquing scores of films? Do you think like, oh, like this isn't, you shouldn't have used wind chimes here. A pan flute would have been much better, or something like that.
it's kind of off and on. It depends on how seriously I take the movie, I guess. Like, I guess a lot of times I don't actually pay attention to it that much, to be honest, or like TV shows or something like that. I'm not necessarily paying attention to it. But if it's something I have higher expectations for, I'll definitely like listen to it and critique it more. Like Blade Runner, I have expectations for that movie, and I'll definitely be listening to that, seeing like what they chose, how retro they tried to make it, or how new, and like the quality of the sounds and all those kinds of things. And
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it kind of depends on what I'm watching.
Yeah, that makes sense. But the fact that you brought up that, like, music is in films, but also TV shows, just really reminds me that, or I guess even going back to your idea of like what a song is, if a song comes from some like um, idea that you were trying to like push, if it's like tension that you're creating in a scene, or if you're like reinforcing a theme that's happening in those scenes or in that episode, it really strikes me that most of the time, I think I know I am, and probably most other people are really unaware of the fact that whenever they're watching TV or a movie, there's like almost always sound. There's almost always specifically like a song which is there, which is kind of informing the way that you're supposed to feel. It seems like it's an incredibly ubiquitous thing that I think just flies under the radar because it's so common and because it just seems so natural at this point. But I wonder, like, when that came to be, like when a score or like a soundtrack to a film became the
Just
mode.
background. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, I think they've used it in kind of a mode way from the start a little bit. Like even I was listening uh, to no, I'm forgetting if it's who it is, but Battle on the Ice is the name of the piece, and it's from an old like Sergei Einstein film or something like that. I can't remember what the filmmaker's name is, and that it's kind of got elements of both of that. Like there's like these kind of droning horns with like repetitive violin stuff, and then there's other parts where there's like all these fast violin lines and things like that. But uh, when it came to be in TV, it got to be more forgettable. I don't know. Maybe doctor shows back in the day. I
Yeah,
don't know, but
exactly.
that's one of the things too. Is like that's both kind of a good thing and an unfortunate thing with this classical music being such a like being the composing world for the most part. Is that yeah, it is pretty like forgettable, and you just don't care about it most of the time, even if it still has the ability to like set the mood. And that's why I'm not really as into like researching theory and all that kind of stuff as much too, is because it all just kind of sets on these things that makes it more of like a craft than an art. And just like if you want something to feel this way, do this, and then you'll have this result. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I think that most people who make TV scores and things like that have kind of went through music that way, and that it's more yeah, just building what they need right for the moment. And a lot of times they do have to compose pretty like quickly too, in order to keep making money and things like that too. So yeah, it is just completely this craft of like, I'm going to grab X, Y, and Z because this is what the scene needs. And there's not really much art or creativity. So even they like don't even probably care about it as much. So it's no surprise that we ignore it too. And it's
Yeah.
unfortunate that, yeah, there can't be more art in that way, but it'd also be more expensive. And we're in America. So
Well, I'm sure there's a template, right? Like if a patient's about to die, you need like a piano couple couple bars of that and like some minor key.
mhm.
It just seems like yeah, like
And when
like
the,
you have a template.
yeah, like when the heart stops, then you just have the violins start droning or something like that. Yeah, it's very much trope driven and template driven
It
for
really,
years and years.
yeah, well, it just really makes me think that like not only does it kind of fly under the radar and we don't notice it, but it really makes me think of the fact that we're primed by things in our life all the time, and that most of the time, like we're not consciously aware of what's priming us. And in fact, that's kind of the definition of priming. But it kind of worries me now, looking back on it, that like there's so many times that I had music that a composer made like dictate to me what I should be feeling, based
Mhm.
off of whatever template they had learned in music school. And the fact that
Yeah,
it
it
worked.
definitely. Yeah, it makes you feel a lot cheaper. It doesn't, yeah, it's not a great feeling thing. And that's why I kind of got out of listening to a lot of like emotion driven music too. It's because I got sick of people saying like you should feel like this now when it had nothing to do with what was going on otherwise. And so, yeah, I definitely got more into the artsy stuff just because of that too. I was sick of people trying to do that and it like working off and on, you know?
Yeah. Do you have
It's not a
any?
good way of life.
Yeah, well, I guess it's kind of like an inescapable way of life if you have any influences that you don't like, specifically choose and like measure on your behavior, right? Like, I mean, no matter what,
Hmm.
if you're out in society, you're gonna have music playing in every lobby. You're gonna have just like the sounds of the city around you, which will influence you. But even things like smell, like on psychological studies, we've people have found that like if you put people in a room that smells bad, in one case, oh man, I'm blanking on the. Oh no, my psychology education is failing me. I can't even think of I can't even think of the name for it. But like in one group you have people filling out a questionnaire when the room smells really really bad, and in the other group you have people filling out a questionnaire with like a neutral smelling room. They found that like you can on questionnaires people will rate themselves as more socially conservative just based on the smell. Because it smells
Oh.
bad, they will be more likely to experience disgust socially for things that aren't even related to smell. And so I mean, like we're primed just by our environment, no matter what. So I guess it's only
Mhm.
natural that people have found a way to mass produce and just craft um, some sound for us to make us feel the way they want us to.
That's true. And even like even going behind what beyond what other people have made, but like just like raw spiritual things, I guess priming you too is like, yeah, that's part of what's hard with composing too, is that the more you get into composing again, the more like it affects your outside life too. Like especially immediately before and after, or like especially after you have this like kind of adrenaline and like this like you just got done performing a show or something like that, and you'll just act completely different than you did than you would be normally, and you could be like a lot more argumentative and a lot more, I don't know, just weird weird, I don't know, hard, not calm and easy to deal with. So that's part of composing too, is that yeah, it can affect how you're acting and you're kind of primed by, I don't know, these universal things, I guess, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, for
But
sure. Well, I mean, like, there's so many things that modulate like our feelings, right? Like I've always been fascinated with like where I draw the line for what I consider a drug, depending on how
mhm,
loose I can classify what a drug is, because we know that. I mean, like, I drink coffee every day, or most days
mhm,
at least, and coffee definitely affects me. But so does a good conversation. Like, so does talking to someone, and so does exercising. And I mean, there's just, and so does just sitting down all day and not doing anything. Like, no matter what, you will have some change on the way that you see the world based on your behavior and what you're consuming and what you're doing. And that's a little bit strange to know that like your experience of the world is always going to be based off of like a few select things that you are conscious of or not conscious of that are going to change your subjective experience totally.
mhm, definitely. And it makes you wonder, yeah, what like reality is, anyways. That uh, I don't know how everything you're seeing and hearing, if it's just representations of yeah these like more base abstract ideas like mathematical or spiritual or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
It's weird.
It is
But
kind of
and
weird.
that's why, and yeah, how much all these, like, even just little things, like how much like eating or something influences you. That's part of what like really terrified me about getting into the working world, is just knowing all that repetition and everything, and how going through that for 40 hours a week or whatever, how that would definitely influence my mind and the way I interact with other people and things like that. And that's part of just that fear kind of stopped me from working on music a little bit. And then even when I have been working on music again, I definitely find a lot more repetition trying to pop up all the time, which I don't like, and things like that. So yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah, do you find that having a full-time job has kind of made you a little more rote? Do you think that you are a little more, um, I guess, predictable with the types of choices you make in music?
Um, I think uh, yeah, I think it does try and make me a little bit more predictable. Yeah, I definitely have certain things keep popping up that I have to like try and like work past. Like I said, like repetition, things like that. Or I don't know. While I'm working, I listen to music, and it's not always fun to listen to these big like long ambient pieces and things like that. You know, they make you more tired and stuff. So I listen to a lot more like pop music, like that stuff I sent you, or not necessarily like pop as in singers, but yeah, like upbeat, beat driven, like 8-beat bars and things like that. And that definitely influences my music, hearing that over and over and over again throughout the day, and then not wanting to compose that when I get off of work. So
Yeah,
it makes it
sure.
more difficult.
Um, I guess on that note, what's your favorite type of music as a consumer, as someone who's just sitting down listening to music? Like, what genres do you find yourself going back to? I saw that
Uh,
you just went to a Gorillaz concert, right?
hmm Yeah. Yeah, definitely electronic music in general has always been my favorite music, I'd say, just because of all the little production things and things like that. I very much like the quality of sound, and electronic people explore that a lot more because they have to, since than like a guitar player necessarily does, and things like that. So I definitely, yeah, I like anything with electronic stuff. And like, you should check out BT's new album. That's one I've been enjoying. Well, it's new since last like December, but and then yeah, like Gorillaz I like because that artist, he's actually my favorite artist in the pop music world, because he, yeah, does all these different things. So like when I listen to a Gorillaz album, I can hear several different genres and several different singers and instruments and all kinds of things. So yeah, I like variety a lot. So anyone who can have a lot of variety in their album, which there isn't usually.
Yeah, because that's Damon Albarn, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, we actually, in Digital North, in my other podcast, we covered the Magic Whip,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and that was my first time listening to Blur, because I didn't know that Blur was still still a band, actually.
Well, they were for that album.
What was that?
That's about it. Just for that album, pretty
Yeah,
much
yeah,
lately.
just for that
Yeah.
album. And I was super surprised that like he put out a new Gorillaz album later that year, and it was a completely different sound than the Magic Whip. Like it was, like I would not have guessed that it came from the same creator, unless I knew it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's definitely like, that's, yeah. I have a lot of respect for that. That's what I'd like to be a lot. If I could look back in like 60 years at what I've done musically, I want to feel that way, that I've done lots of different things. But I still want it to, I don't know, be more like artsy driven too, which I'm not sure how to mix pop stuff a little bit more with art, because I feel like the more you add repetition, the more it kills the art. So I don't know. That's one of my biggest difficulties right now.
Do you do you care much about the lyrical quality of music? Like, are you a songwriter? Do you write lyrics for music ever?
Not at all. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've never ever noticed lyrics at all usually. I don't know lyrics to songs at all, even if it's a song I listen to all the time. I'll know like maybe part of the chorus or something like that. I'll be able to sing like the entire melody and all the harmonies and all these kinds of things, but yeah, the words I just never noticed. And so like I'll be listening to a song that I'm like, oh, I love this song, and I'll show it to somebody, and they'll be like, oh, that's about like sexual abuse. And I'm like, oh, really? Like, I don't know.
I just really like the trumpet.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I've always been. It's like very like music driven and just not even noticing what they're saying at all. And now that I'm trying to sing more, like I have to learn the words more just for like to be able to sing, to be able to direct the energy and everything. Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, you just need to know the words for singing. But I don't know why that ever started. I don't know how I got so into like just listening to music and never noticing words. I guess like
As
I
someone
don't know.
who played and is someone who sang in a choir, like you
Yeah,
kind of had to know them before.
I think uh, I don't know. And yeah, like I always had to be like memorizing stuff as a kid, like poetry or Bible verses or like I don't know whatever, like programs for church and stuff like that. But yeah, like like lyrics, I just never ever had them pass through my mind. And I remember like uh, if songs had bad words, but I told my parents that I didn't notice that the words were bad, then I could like keep listening to that music. And I don't know if that's part of it too. I don't think that'd be a big enough thing to do it, but like I think I just really, really like sound. I think it's just like the biggest part of my life is just enjoying sound. And I don't know, it's just a weird thing.
Okay, because I would say I'm almost the opposite of that. Because like I grew up listening to a lot of rap music, and rap is still, I mean, probably like 40% of my library, just that one genre. And I've I've found like when I listen to rap songs with my girlfriend, for example. I mean, she's Norwegian, and a lot of the lyrics are hard for her to understand, and a lot of rap music will have like the same like 8 bars repeating over and over and over for like their actual like music part of it. And that never annoys me because I'm so concerned with how the rappers are saying the words and what words they're saying and if it's clever and if it has any meaning to it, that I just like forget the fact that it's the same, you know, 16 keys of a piano playing over and over and over and over. I and I almost feel like that almost hurts my music liking ability because I've been listening to a good amount of jazz lately, and I've found that like unless the jazz has a lot of sounds that I'm really interested in, it's so easy for me to lose focus. Like unless it's a saxophone or like trumpet, like as like the main instrument, it's so easy for me to just like not be paying attention to what's going on because there are usually not any words.
Yeah, and I don't know. Do you think part of that's just because of jazz being kind of standardized a little bit like classical music too, that you're like, oh, this sounds like a jazz trumpet solo. Okay, like I don't need to listen to this. I'm gonna tune out.
Maybe.
But that's part of my feeling like selfish working on music and everything too, is because I do care a lot about things going on, and I want to be able to say something important, like I think most people do. But then I sit down to like write something, and I have like sat down to write lyrics, but then I'm just like, no, I'm just gonna like work on sounds instead because I love this way more. I'll just like get distracted and start working on sounds. So yeah, I don't know. I just don't have anything to do with words, I guess, so far.
But do you ever sit down and think like, I want to make a song which has seeds in, um, you know, like injustice, and like make a song which is supposed to be evocative in that way? Like do you ever think like this is what I'm going to try to make people feel with this song?
Um, I I'm trying to think. I don't think I've had anything necessarily to deal with like social issues, but I've definitely sat down and like tried to concentrate on like feelings I had with like somebody like dying or something like that, or like despair or like loneliness or I don't know, things like that. Like, yeah, I've definitely sat down and had like certain ideas of like the human condition that I've tried to like compose as the central idea and trying to like get through them. Like, I don't want the whole piece to just be like, I'm sad, because that's not like, it's very one-sided and not interesting. I want it to go somewhere and have the music lead me out of that sadness or emptiness. And then that's how I end up making a piece, as it goes from, yeah, that initial feeling to getting out of it somehow musically, and then seeing what those music elements were sometimes tell me uh, more about how to progress with my own life. And I hope that other people can hear them and think about that too. But so yeah, I definitely have like certain issues that are I keep as like the seed or idea of my pieces, but never any like social ones or anything like that so far. I feel like to be able to express that with just sounds, I don't know, I guess you could, but it might not work because you're not using actual words to make it more specific, or it might just come off as like cheesy because you just have like police sirens or something stupid like that, you know? So, yeah, I don't know.
The sounds of like billy clubs bouncing off of someone's ribs.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, actually, there was like all the, um, what was it called? When they were in, frick. What were the big protests going on in New York like 5, 6 years ago? Like where they started chanting like "We are the 99%," where all that was coming out of. Occupy
Like
Wall Street.
Occupy Wall Street.
Yeah, that. Yeah, actually, I took pieces from some of like the troubles going on and like some of the chants that would have been recognizable and things like that. And I started making a piece out of that. But yeah, I just ended up feeling like cheap about it, and I ended up throwing it away. So I guess that's part of it too, is like I take those things like very seriously. And so I've never been able to like finish something with it. I don't feel like I usually have the breadth of knowledge of it or like personal experience with it to really talk about it in like a very, very like mature and like in-depth way. So if something terrible happens to me or something ever, like maybe then I'll be able to, but yeah, so far I end up like throwing stuff away usually when I try to start writing about something like that, and just leave it to somebody else to write about.
Sure. Yeah. Do you think that if you are trying to like write a piece of music, like not necessarily a soundscape, but a song, do you think that like most good songs come from a place of pain? Because I mean, like growing up, that was always the type of music that I was drawn to, like a protagonist that was going through a really hard time. That was always what I was magnetized to. Do you think it's? I mean, like, do you think it's just? Do you think it's that like pain and despair and loneliness is more generalizable so that it connects with people more, or do you think that maybe people are able to dig down into those emotions a little bit better than they would something like happiness? Because like happy songs are not that common. Like the only thing I can really think of off the top of my head that isn't just kind of over the top pop music would be something like Tycho, with their kind of like sunshiny music.
I don't know if I've listened to Tycho, so I guess I'm not sure. But
It's beautiful.
as for like the deal, how's it spelled?
Tycho.
Okay, yeah, I've seen that name, but I don't think I've ever listened to him. But I don't. I've definitely thought about that before, and I feel like, yeah, like sadness and things like that are definitely deeper emotions than happiness, unfortunately. I don't like saying that, but I kind of feel that way, at least personally. And yeah, like I was always drawn to growing up like very like melancholy music. Like I didn't like it like just being like strictly sad. I liked it being more of like that paradoxical nature of like life, that it's like you can always like look out and see beauty, but also like, I don't know, see the sadness and stuff. Like right in front of me, there's like a tree that's like dying in the fall, but at the same time, like the night sky like looks kind of like nice with it, and it's cool, and there's interesting things you can pick out of it. But I don't know.
I
But
remember,
I don't know. I
or,
don't like. What?
just sorry, on that note, I remember when we were on duty, um, when we were supposed to be touring the residence halls, we walked over to Concordia and we sat at the lake at Concordia, and we just watched some ducks. And
Mhm.
I remember saying, like, look at these ducks, they're just hanging out and just floating around. They don't have a care in the world. And you're like, well, actually, I mean, like, winter's coming pretty soon, and they're probably, like, you see that they're trying to eat. Like, they're probably starving. Like, the life of a duck is probably pretty rough. Just going from place to place without any secure food source. Well, we're just, like, sitting there, just, like, watching them and, like, philosophizing on them.
Well, I'm glad I ruined your duck experience. No, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. My mind's always trying to like think of the opposite, and like yeah, like I said, like I love variety, and so my mind is just always drawn to like what else isn't being like thought of or said with this and everything. So yeah, then it leads to yeah this like back and forth of emotions too. Like Becky's definitely noticed that living with me a lot more too. Is that like I'm like very up and down all the time. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's like a again, like I think it's just so affected. I know I am really affected. Like I think that I almost forget what I feel like at other times. Like I can only be fixated on how I feel in that moment. And so like if I'm feeling pessimistic, it's really hard for me to remember that like just a couple of hours ago I was like on top of the world and everything seemed attainable. It's like a selective memory loss for like my long term like emotional stability. I forget that there's kind of like a middle ground beyond what my brain chemistry is telling me in that moment.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to fight. I feel like it's something, I don't know, I feel like it's something that maybe you get better at as you get older just because you've dealt with longer amounts of time and you're able to, yeah, think about what you are other than what you are at the moment more because you've just had more of those moments, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, but then I don't know. I guess it depends too because I've definitely seen old people who've like lost their spouse, and that definitely keeps driving on them, even if they had like a previously happy 50 years or something like that, you know? So I don't
Yeah,
know.
man.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be so
it,
hard.
but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why we work that way. That, yeah, you forget or you don't have the ability to just choose what you're feeling at the moment. Even though there's like all these like Buddhist things and things like that where they're like, oh, like just forget about the past and all that kind of stuff. But like, I don't know, it doesn't work. At least it doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And what part of it is I like don't want to let go of the moment either. I want to know everything that there is. So I don't know.
Well, I would contend that at least for me, meditation has helped. I've I've tried meditating on and off, and I mean, like one of the core components isn't about losing the now. It's about really trying to experience the now and really trying to experience reality for what it is beyond the concepts that you kind of create in your mind. Like instead of looking at like a tree and saying, "Oh, that's a tree," I can classify it, you know, in this genus, in this species, in this superfamily. You can just say like it just is. Like I'm just looking at something, and I am just something, and like I'm having
Mm.
these thoughts and these symbols which represent it, but like that is not the reality of it. It's just that thing. It's just it just is, you know, and that's something that's kind of nice about some forms of Buddhism, and I guess it helps. But like, yeah, I mean, at the same time, you can have like a super like respectful and like earthly like Buddhist monk that you're talking to, and if you mention that you don't, you know, believe in reincarnation or something, maybe they'll like slam a door in your face and tell you
Yeah.
that you're an ignorant fool. So everyone's susceptible to it for sure.
Yeah. Hmm.
So you said that
And
you wouldn't feel comfortable or like you almost don't feel comfortable like making music that doesn't have a like seeds and something like related to like you used God, but like would you feel comfortable? Would you feel comfortable if you tried to say like this is a song for world peace and then like having that like be the seed that you are sowing into that song and then having that be shown to people?
Yeah, I'd be fine with that. I'd be, yeah, open to a lot more ideas like world peace and everything. No, yeah, I said I feel guilty not having like pieces be about like God or things like that, but I don't think it actually, like, I haven't stuck to that actually being like a core piece of my pieces. Like, I don't know. I feel good about my pieces, but I don't know if other family necessarily respect it, but I just keep making it anyways because it's what I respond to, and so I just have to do it. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
Do you find that you kind of habitually just kind of like sit down and think like, oh, I'll just look for some sounds and I'll maybe like stick them together and like see what happens, or do you kind of like throughout the day think of like, oh, a Dodge Ram horn, that's what I want in my next piece? Like, what is the musical process for you? How do you make a song?
Um, it's both, I guess. Usually I start out not um usually I start out not knowing which sounds I'm going to use because whenever I have tried to start out doing that, like those initial ideas aren't as strong as like what I end up just coming up with as I just mess around. So yeah, I usually just sit down and start trying things out and seeing where it goes. But then as I'm composing, I'll constantly have like where I am in that piece and like what kind of sounds I'm looking for to get out of that. And if I hear them in everyday life, then I'll try and find that same thing and see if it really does work in the piece or not. And sometimes then that will work. And there too is part of why I like using sound effects and everything too is like you were talking about, just seeing the tree for the tree. Like with the sound effects, I try and not think about them as like this is water or this is a car or something. I try and think about them for their like pitch and rhythmic elements. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, last question for you before we part
Oh no.
ways. Would you rather wake up tomorrow completely deaf or without any of your fingers?
Neither. Uh, so I can't even like pull a Beethoven and just like put my ear against something.
Nothing. Like
Uh,
you can maybe like sense vibration through any organ but your ears.
uh, I don't know. I'd definitely still keep my fingers over my ears, I guess. Hands are more important.
Practical
I
man.
can,
Practical man.
yeah, I don't know. Well, I don't know. Yeah. I can always try and find new things. Even if it's not necessarily something I could be artistic at, I could go for the craft route more.
Yeah, there you go.
So
You
I don't
can
know.
just
Yeah.
remember your music theory classes and just write things in like this circle of fifths or something like that.
See that? Yeah. And that's the thing too, is like I absolutely like love music and it's like very much who I am. But at the same time, I always try and keep grounded to reality,
Right on.
to what's else is important.
That's that's probably a good it's a good idea to keep with you.
hmm
All right,
Maybe it's
Peter,
because I grew up with less money, so I don't want to go down the starving artist route and throw everything away just for one thing.
That's right. I'm sure it's a lot more glamorous when you actually haven't experienced it before.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you so much for the time today, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to Learner's Permit. You can find links to Peter's work on curiousmagnet.com, as well as in the comments section of this YouTube episode. Also, we now have a Twitter handle, which is exciting for us, so make sure you follow us under a new handle at The Curious Magnet on Twitter. We will be posting links to just really interesting stories or YouTube videos or pieces of work we think that people should be checking out. So make sure to follow us on Twitter in order to get the full Curious Magnet experience. And as always, you can follow us on Facebook, and you'll get some of the quickest updates when we put out new work on Facebook. Have a great day. Stay curious, my friends.